Well, we spent a lot of time talking about Mac Jones.
Say his real name.
Mike Jones.
His real name.
Oh, Mike McCorkle Jones.
McCorkle.
So Middlecoff found out on the live stream Monday that his name is McCorkle. That was a great moment. So if Trey Lance or Justin Fields is the pick for the 49ers at 3, the question then is, what happens to Mac Jones? We've been talking about him like he might be a top 3 pick. Could he fall out of the top 10 if he's not the Niners pick?
Right before we jumped on, we had been trying to get him on the show, and he was so busy. One of his guys hit me up and said, it's craziness. If the Niners take him, 100%, we'll get him on with you guys. So it's like, I was like, because I'm not down on McCorkle. You want to bring McCorkle on the show? I'm game. But we mentioned it the other day on the podcast, or maybe it was a live stream. I've been thinking a lot about this. In texting Greg Papa, I just asked, and I am not anti-McCorkle. Like, I think he's a good player. You couldn't have watched Alabama and go, like, their quarterback's a scrub. And I think sometimes, and I've said this forever, if you go pick 36 or 38 or 42, that does not mean people didn't view you as a good player, right? Like,
well, if you've seen the I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to say Tom Brady's name with because I know that comp happens and that's a crazy comp. But have you just seen what Bill Belichick said about Brady when they drafted him? Like, it was really complimentary, right? If you watch him, he was tough. He knew how to win. Can't wait to get him in here and see. Like, he didn't view him like I just drafted a scrub. He didn't know he drafted the greatest of all time.
Well, because part of it is forever. I think we're in the quarterback inflation time, and it's really the last couple of years since I'd say the Mahomes. I text a buddy with the Chiefs. I'm like, in a weird way, I think you guys changed everything.
I agree.
Because you guys got this franchise quarterback at number 10, and all you had to give up was a first-round pick. And I think all these teams, they either passed on him or they could have traded up to get him. And Deshaun Watson goes 2 picks later.
Yeah,
it's just that inflated Mac Jones. Because I when I was texting with Papa, I said
it inflated Mac Jones.
Well, it just inflated quarterbacks.
Yeah,
and I think Mac Jones is benefiting, potentially from getting drafted this high because of the quarterback inflation. Now, I think a large part of that is Kyle, because in the scouting community, there's never been a player, at least in my adult life. There have been Christian Ponders and Blaine Gabberts. Those guys didn't go 3rd overall. Some of those guys went 8 or 11 or 12. Like, that's still really high, but there's a big difference between going 12 and going 3, right? And I think part of the conversation with Mike McCorkle, Mac Jones, is that he's not just going 3. That team was not at 3, right? They had to move up and traded a freight to get him. There's never been a player with his physical attributes, which are not elite in any, his best quality is he's unreal at reading the defense. It's like, well, are you just seeing because his head's moving? Like, how do you really know? Right? It's one of those things. It's not truly quantifiable. Now, I think coaches have a better feel for that probably, especially if you can call Sark and he's like, hey, or Saban's like, here's our play sheet from those 5 games. If you really want to dive deep, I'm telling you, this guy's elite or whatever. But the average fan or even evaluator don't know. That's why quarterbacks, I'm not even talking in the NFL, have been hit or miss in the history of the league. That I just think his physical skill set is on most years, I'd say historically, C.J. Beathard. Now, Mac was a better college player than C.J. Beathard. I went back and looked. He was 58 career percentage, 58. Yeah, he wasn't even that accurate. But what you just watch C.J. in practice or watch him in games, not a great athlete, not a great arm, but just was probably a really good college quarterback. I mean, really was. I mean, started at Iowa, played in a Rose Bowl. The guy was a good player. Mac's better version than that. But I don't think if CJ was a mid to late 3rd rounder, to me, normal years pre-quarterback inflation, I'd say Mac's somewhere between 25 and 40. If you because we have players, you and I have been lucky enough to spend a lot of time and go to practices with the Raiders and the 49ers, and 2 guys in the same draft class who have a lot of physical characteristics that parallel Mac. Some are better, some are worse, in Derek and Jimmy. And they were pre-quarterback inflation, and they both went in the 2nd round. Then I'd say if either one of those 2 guys...
And we're smaller school relatively to Alabama guys.
But if I told you that Derek Carr coming out of Fresno State or Jimmy Garoppolo coming out of Northern or Southern or whatever Illinois school he went to. Are either one of those guys going in the second round of this draft? If Derek Carr, Fresno State coming out right now, how does he not go in the first round?
I don't think Derek would. Jimmy, I don't put them in the same class athletically.
That's fair.
And
Let's just
from
say
an
Derek.
arm standpoint,
let's just use Derek.
Derek
much more
Derek
productive.
Carr would be. Derek Carr was. I don't want to
Zach
say it was
Wilson.
Zach Wilson, but it was kind
I
of
think
Zach
he
Wilson.
was, guy. I think he was.
It was even similar to the point that like there weren't a lot of big games he played in his last year, but he played like a big game, right? And it didn't go great. I think that was the USC game and the bowl game.
Remember the year before too against SMU, Hawaii Bowl.
Marcus
It was,
Hunt, right? That was the big guy.
Grigson picked him in the second round. Terrible.
Wasn't he like 6'8" or something, like
Matt,
6'10"?
oh my, he was massive.
But yeah, I think that's the comp for Derek. Now, does that mean Derek would go 2 in this draft? No. But
Is he going
he'd
top
be
20?
Yes.
100%. Is he going top 12?
Might.
Probably.
Like to your point with quarterbacks.
Because guy, I think Mac 6 years ago is going in the 30s or 40s. So he's competing now to go to the Niners. But my point on this whole thing, if the Niners don't take him, are we sure that is there a chance that over half the league has him as like the 5th or 6th quarterback on their board? Because
doesn't like
he has
him.
nothing in common with the other guys.
Right. And also, do you like him more than Sam? Let's go through it here. Atlanta at 4, nope. Cincinnati at 5, nope. Now, you could have trades. Miami at 6, nope.
No.
Right, especially if like a quarterback goes 4. If the quarterback's the top 4 picks, now you've got Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, 2 tackles.
But even let's even say that Pitts goes at 4. So you're okay. Then the Bengals are taking a player. Miami's taking a player. The Lions aren't doing it. Nope.
Carolina doesn't make sense.
Schefter just tweeted they're actively looking to trade back.
Denver.
That would be a curveball. But if you were them, would you take Mac Jones over Justin Fields? Because in this scenario, Justin Fields hadn't been picked either.
Well, I thought you said. Oh, did you say Kyle Pitts went 4?
I just said a player goes
Gotcha.
4, non-quarterback.
Well, I would. No, I think you take
obviously in this scenario, you're right. A trade up probably
4
happens,
like those 4 guys. I would expect go ahead of Mac Jones.
In the history of the sport, if we just take out, let's just assume Trey Lance goes 3, and there's Justin Fields and Mac Jones on the board. Mac Jones does not hold a candle to the physical attributes of Justin Fields. Now, playing quarterback is more. I mean, Alex Smith just retired. It's more than just physical attributes. But part of taking quarterbacks really high, if you're going to take a swing with a physical attribute guy. We've seen the Christian Ponders, the Blaine Gabberts. We've seen the average be failed too. And that's what you give Scout Haberman some credit. Like to assume that Mac Jones has a high floor would be pretty ignorant to the way the draft works.
Because people
there
don't.
are no such thing.
Yeah, there's like this idea that we got. Wait a second. The Bengals. Let's say quarterbacks go in the top 4. The Bengals are going to be drafting either Penei Sewell, Rashawn Slater, Kyle Pitts, or Jamar Chase. There's just 4 lock Pro Bowlers. They're all pros. Like it's probably not going to work out that way. Maybe it does. Maybe it's an all-time draft. If like all those guys are lock superstars and 3 of these quarterbacks hits, then it's an all-time draft. That's what it is, right?
I mean, we're talking like the
But those aren't
2011 J.J. Watt, Aldon
usually-
Smith. I mean, that Julio Jones, A.J. Green, Von Miller, Cam Newton. It's that draft a decade later is still viewed. Oh, the 11 draft, man. That's one of the great drafts of all time. Partly because it was like a 60% hit rate. There was still a Blaine Gabbert in there. There were still shitty players. Just listing the players you listed, if I wanted to throw on, okay, let's throw Patrick Surtain, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle. Of like those 7-8 players, if 4 of them are good, if 4 of them are really good and the other 4 are just like regular kind of average draft picks, that's an incredible draft.
Yeah.
Because probably 2 of the quarterbacks will be good.
Because
So you
now
got
one
2
of those guys
quarterbacks.
is going like 11. See,
I know.
I think you start talking about teams. It's like, will Detroit take him? Would Denver take him? Would Dallas take him? Would the Giants take him? Philly can't mess around with that this year. The Chargers, no. Minnesota, would Minnesota do it? Like, is there? Even
So
if
they just get 2 Kirk Cousins on their rosters?
yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering, would Pittsburgh, like if he's there at 24, would Pittsburgh? I'm just trying to find somebody who would go, you know what, this is value. We could use him, maybe not right now, but soon. How does he end up as a first-round pick? Does Bill at 15 see him at 12 and go, you know what, I want to go to 12 and get him? Belichick, okay? But they're just, we talk about this. I've said this a lot. There are not most teams are usually in a weird spot. The majority of the league's usually in a weird spot of not sure yet if their quarterback's good enough, not ready to take a first-round quarterback, but also pretty sure their guy's not a franchise quarterback. Most guys are not franchise quarterbacks, and most guys are not about to get cut. And so you're always in this little realm where you're like, okay, we're Chicago. Are we taking a quarterback in the first round this year?
Well, Mac Jones might be better than Andy Dalton right now.
So if Mac Jones is there at 20, does Chicago take him?
I mean, it's a tough spot. I don't know what you do.
This is what I'm saying. Yeah. It's just like there's a good case to make to take him. There's also a good case to make you go, we got to get an impact player at another position right now because we just got to make the playoffs this year, right? But you could exactly, John, if you're in the meeting room, you'd go, well, Mac Jones is going to be better than Andy Dalton this year. And we got other good players on this team.
Because I would rather have this year, I'd rather have the unknown of McCorkle than Andy Dalton. But if I was the owner, it's like, hey, do you guys believe this guy's a franchise quarterback, or are you just doing it to try to save your jobs? That's where I might get involved. If I was a McCaskey.
Right.
One of the 3 90-year-old McCaskies that are just roaming around.
Would New Orleans take him at 28?
Yes, see, to me, there is value then. This is where I say, this is normally Mac Jones. This is who he is, a late 20s, early 30s guy.
And those quarterbacks can be good.
Now, some inflation, if Kyle Shanahan is the perfect coach for him, if he has so much money, it doesn't matter. Like, that would be the analogy, right? Like, inflation to Kyle is irrelevant. But I would say that, like, thinking he's quarterback proof has been proven with Mullins and CJ and just over the years, it's not necessarily true, right? He's not quarterback recession proof. We've seen him with average guys lose games.
For sure.
This year was a great example.
But I do think we're talking, these are not guys that ever sniffed. These are not guys.
Nick Mullins and CJ never had the accomplishments of this guy. But my point is,
there's more clay there with Mac Jones.
But physically, they do have some similarities. He's closer to them than he is like some Cam Newton or Kyler Murray or some just freak top 5 pick typically, right? Carson Wentz. Think of where the guys that have missed, where you feel like Carson Wentz missed. This year was just bad, but it's like his physical talent is elite. Everyone acknowledges that. I think like as we watch more and more with Mariota, we're like, I don't think physically he's that special. Jared Goff, you're like, I just don't see the physical attributes, right? Jameis was like, I think most people acknowledge, like, Jameis has the skills. It's like his decision-making is terrible. I do think if you're going to go down, and that's what Trubisky, it's like, God, I just don't see it with Trubisky. When you have an elite prospect, elite talent, I think people understand better if it doesn't work out. It's hard when you just you take the guy with the lack of physical attributes.
But to the point we made earlier, if they draft Mac Jones, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Mac Jones end up as a better quarterback than any of the guys drafted after him. Like, I think that's a real if the 49ers have Mac Jones, he might end up as a better quarterback than the other two. That's a real possibility.
Well, I think Kyle would tell you they believe he would, right? That's why they'd make.
That's why you do it. Yeah, I'm just saying I don't think that's a crazy thought. Back to my original point, which you referenced, there is no sure thing, and that includes Justin Fields with Kyle Shanahan. That's not a sure thing either.
One thing I do wonder is, like, the crazy part about quarterback is how much the intangible stuff matters, like how much guys like you. Remember Mariota? Remember when Mariota got into that game against the Chargers last year? And I remember looking at Twitter, all the Tennessee Titans players were like, fuck yeah, Marcus, go kill it. It's like I think people loved him. People in Tennessee really liked the guy.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't fail because he's too quiet. No, like, the leadership, the guys gravitated toward him. So it's like, just because you have elite intangibles, it doesn't even – I think it's why it's so impossible to draft this position and why we have so many hits and misses. You can be a great guy, good leader, and still fail.
You got to value it the right amount, right? You and I have both been at Oregon's campus. Marcus Mariota is like the centerpiece of Oregon football if you go to their campus.
Yeah.
Like the centerpiece. Like, it's – you walk into the main room and boom, there's his Heisman. And like
he's a bigger deal than Justin Fields, or Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
And Marcus Mariota, I mean, it's hard. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but more than likely Justin Herbert is going to be infinitely, and just the gap as NFL pros will
Right.
be wide.
I think you would say pretty quickly that the skill sets are very different.